So Netflix's The Twits is out now. Releasing over the last weekend, it is an interesting project. Being the latest in original animated projects by Netflix, it really is kind of hit or miss with the quality of the shows they make. And that's kind of representative of all the stuff they make. They've been chasing the high of Stranger Things for literally years now. Sometimes you get the Electric State, and sometimes, in animation as well, you get K-pop Demon Hunters. So, where you're wondering, does Netflix's The Twits land on the full spectrum of amazing to terrible Netflix stuff? Well, it's interesting. This is the movie I've at least known about for a year, only in screenshots, and then suddenly a trailer released about 2 weeks before the main release. And it is meant to be a story that's relatively near and dear to my heart, with it actually being an adaptation from a Roald Dahl book, obviously, notably, British. I think I kind of overlooked that when I first reacted to the trailer earlier in the month, namely because it's in my childhood education system, but I don't know if that's necessarily the default in America. Regardless, it's kind of not relevant anyway, because this is an incredibly Americanized story. In the books, the Twits are very obviously British. Everything is British coded. It is a specifically British children's book, all the way down to the dark humor and the slightly abrasive language, which briefly got censored back in 2023 and then got rescinded again. So, how does this movie balance on that line? Well, I'm pretty sure all of the slightly more controversial lines were omitted from this movie. They don't say certain words like hag, nutty, and batty, insinuating more the actual mental unwellness of being crazy. But also, more than that, this isn't really a Twits story. It is loose on the licensing of these characters. It just takes the concept of them and runs in a whole new direction. And not all of it is terrible, but it's notably not British. You have got Peter Kay playing the main role, Mr. Twit, and his voice, I think, perfectly fits with the character, but Mrs. Twits is fully American with all of that southern drawl, and the whole landscape of this world is set in America. It does away with most of the political commentary that came from the Roald Dahl original books, whilst there is some semblance of that in all sorts of places you can read into, but it's American political commentary. Even still, to say that I had a terrible time with this movie is absolutely not the case. I'm a relatively Americanized Brit myself. I could just come to accept, oh, this is different. What a shame. Let's enjoy what it is. And there is a lot of enjoyable things to see in this movie. I mean, visually, it is fantastic. Ugly, and that's the point. I love this art style, I love the animation decisions, and especially the cinematography, the choices in camera lenses, virtual camera lenses. I think generally, it's a pretty well put together project with some clear cinematographic intentions and directorial choices. We even got a comment on our original trailer reaction from one of the people involved that said, "We've been working on this for years and are so looking forward to sharing it with us all." And in that regard, I think this project can be really nice and wholesome, clearly made by some talented people who should pat themselves on the back. However, it's kind of just an alright movie, mixed in a lot of ways. There is clearly potential in the direction they chose to take, and while the choice in taking that direction alone is pretty 50-50, I think for the most part, the choices they made are pretty good and okay. It's not reinventing the wheel necessarily, but it is reinventing the characters in a nice new spin. The main reason the Twits were invented in the first place is because of Roald Dahl's hatred for big over-the-top beards, and that's very much still the case in this. You've got a couple of fireflies that live inside Mr. Twit's beard telling the story of this whole thing like a narrator. And when it comes to the sort of lowbrow humor of these grungy characters, they definitely keep up with it in all sorts of fantastical ways. The Twits always pulling pranks on each other, doing these disgusting little actions. Simplistic jokes like getting the word diarrhea and diorama wrong are all in there too. But overall, it does a fairly good job on this new spin of the characters in most places, and the humor, I think, actually keeps up quite nicely. I'm not usually one for fart jokes, but these fart jokes at least slightly have layers to them, they have intentions to them, and that's always nice to see. Well, somewhat nice to see, usually. They're not all winners. There is a notable modern twang in this in the form of the Mugglewumps, but we'll get to them in a bit. On top of the fact that this is a visually nice looking movie with its own new direction, it's also a musical now. Definitely not what Roald Dahl intended. And while at first I genuinely thought it was just going to be one song, because at the beginning of the movie, the Fireflies do say it's not a musical, it's just one song. But no, there's 3. Maybe 4? Fine. These songs are notably not very earwormy. They don't stick into your mind that strongly. And I wouldn't exactly say they're bad, but they are just kind of padding in a lot of ways. Particularly one of the Mugglewumps actually singing. I think that's probably the weakest of the lot, if I had to guess. The Mugglewumps themselves are also now magical beings whose tears, when upside down, is the power source of everything Twitlandia related. Twitlandia being the amusement park that the Twits have wanted to build on the town, and a main central plot point of this movie. No longer is it that they are retired circus trainers or anything like that. It's a bit more grander, a bit more American in that way. But I think it works, for the most part. You know, like, I enjoy it. That's kind of the thoughts of this review in a nutshell. The Mugglewumps, I kind of roll my eyes at specifically. The fact that a guy has anxiety and spits out more cutesy creatures just makes me think of corporate merchandising the whole way through. But they're nice enough. They're trying to push through the emotional side of this movie, connecting emotionally with these orphans without any parents, whilst dealing with their own familial issues of being trapped in a cage. But I don't think the emotional weight of this movie really strikes gold for the most part. There are scenes that could have the potential to do it, and then they don't hit as hard as they could. And that's a shame. In that regard, it's just a simplistic entertainment of a movie, rather than cinema, you know? But considering they are at least based off of something in the books, just adapted a little bit means they're not completely off the wall inventing their own things, so like, it's okay. And in a lot of places, they do still keep true to the books. The Twits are still trying to capture birds and then turn them into bird pie. That's nice. It's not really a main thing. The birds don't speak and they don't interact with the orphans, but they're there in the background. Hey there, thank you for making it to the halfway mark of this video. Come subscribe if you haven't already for more new movie reviews. Later in the year, we've got Zootopia 2, a new SpongeBob movie, and In Your Dreams, also by Netflix. So come subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get back to the second half of this video. Cheers. But anyway, as the plot picks up, what it really does become is the Twits versus the orphans. The classic conflict you want to see in this movie, as with Twitlandia being condemned, they attack the town and the orphans expose the fact that it was them that attacked the town. And with it comes a source of political commentary that I do find weirdly enjoyable in that dark humor kind of way, because the Twits, in a whole twist of the narrative, get thrown in jail and then get bailed out by the citizens of this town because they could be warped into electing the most grotesque person for coming up with an alternative to the industry norm. It is a commentary on illogical voters sometimes, and that, I think, comes with a lot of good humor. The whole thing then becomes that all of the adults of this world also join in attacking this orphanage. Clearly morally despicable, but they're just lost in the flow. They believe in Twitlandia, and I genuinely find a lot of entertainment out of that. Maybe it's the kind of dark humor kind of thing. If this town was British again, they'd be over at Clacton-on-Sea, and they do find a good little bit of humor on that, even if it is a little bit on the nose. The dad being like, maybe we shouldn't have voted for the guy we saw get arrested on TV and should have listened to our daughter. But hey, it's a kid's movie. Maybe sometimes being that upfront in the messaging helps. Sure, it's entertaining. Also, while I mentioned the circus connection, they do actually add a little bit of lore in this movie that both Twits themselves were abandoned as kids, one from a bowling alley and the other from a circus. So maybe by some theory, the book version of the Twits is actually their parents or grandparents. Either way, at least there's a faint reference to their original source material. And overall, while this isn't exactly going to be deep storytelling, it is a fun, entertaining evening to watch the Twits do their antics, even though they're really mostly just Twits by name. But visually, it looks nice. They do some interesting things. And oddly enough, I kept seeing references to Toy Story 2, of all things. I don't know if it's meant to be symbolically representing anything, if it is just a homage to Toy Story 2. There's a couple of shots that are just one-to-one the same beat. I assume it's not just copying. I'm gonna take it as a reference instead. And then after a couple other story beats, the mayor's bottom explodes. And the guy from the orphanage tells an incredibly dated comedy line. that I think is probably some of the lowest points of the movie. It is a little bit behind. We eventually come round to the destruction of the Twits' super plan, as there's now a frog that if you lick the toes of, turns you into the opposite of what you are, so turning the Twits opposite makes them guilty and blow themselves up. Only to end us back towards the ending from the book, and this is where the message of this movie tries to come through, and it's interesting, man. So, if you don't know, the ending of the Twits is that they are killed by the dreaded shrinks. They get stuck upside down after thinking their whole house is upside down, and then in the books, they shrink down and disappear. It's that classic British dark ending of these terrible, horrible people deserve to be dead by the end of their story for being so horrible. Don't be like them or you will die a similar horrible fate. Is kind of the message of the books. This movie doesn't do that, and I'm myself am still just mixed on how I feel about it. Maybe that's why the reviews everywhere is so mixed. Because in this movie, whilst that beat does happen, the other narrative thing of note is that animals and mugglewumps can only be understood by children with a deep sense of empathy. And for the kids to now choose to kill a couple of adults, they themselves are losing a sense of their empathy and lose their connection with the animals. And so they decide to cut them free because they don't want to contribute to the rest of the hatred in this world. This is the political commentary this movie is trying to say, and it's interesting. You know, it's very much that classic be the good guy with the moral high horse. And even when people are so reprehensible they can't be forgiven really, you should still cut them some slack, even though they won't to you. For a kids movie, as a message to kids giving them morals, I think I do fully get on board with this directorial choice. It at least, you know, strikes a little harder than, look at these bad people, now they disappear for being bad. I guess very much an old school way of covering narratives, this is a lot more modern and soft. Whilst at the same time, they could have definitely taken this direction worse, and they didn't. So maybe that's valid? Because the Twits, upon immediately being released from their gluey demise, do not change at all. They immediately gun for the kids again to turn them into pie, and that I like. I like that they didn't turn the Twits good by just showing them some good, very much showcasing that some people can't be saved, but you yourself can still hold on to your own moral code. I think that's a good message, but it's also very much not the original Twits book, you know? And what's the point of adapting this into a movie if you are just gonna change so many different elements and just keep the same two characters? And even then, one of them's American now. I think it's good and fine if you can just appreciate that this is not the original Twits. It's going very differently. It's a classic American move. I think this is a fun, enjoyable movie. You know, it's like halfway along the mark on terrible and amazing. From there, the Twits then, through their own selfish means, end up destroying themselves, continuing to be cruel to each other, pranking themselves until they're sent off across the world and eaten by a giant frog. Yes, that's the real ending of the movie. Hey, at least there's no sequel bait. All the while, the kids then become super successful, selling the Mugglewumps' tears to a massive corporation, and they don't make commentary on that. How very Netflix. It is a weird, hodgy-podgy of a movie that takes some fun characters, has fun with them, and then very much ignores a lot of the elements of the original. If you want to just put on a simple movie that's entertaining, Netflix The Twits will happily satisfy that hunger, but if you're looking for the proper Roald Dahl experience and some good, deep, more emotional and well put together narrative, I don't think you're quite gonna find it here. As much as it has hints of emotion, it just doesn't strike the chord as well as it could. It has homages to Toy Story 2 in there, but it's never gonna be quite as good. And even after watching this movie and sitting on it for a while, I'm just left a little bit mixed and conflicted. It's okay. Only okay. And that at least is all the thoughts I have in regards to Netflix's new The Twits movie. So I guess I'd best end things off there. My name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this review. Do tell me your thoughts on The Twits. Have you seen it? What are your thoughts? Is this trashy terrible? Or am I giving it too many flowers? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts and more on it all, and I shall see you all in a little bit. Cheerio!